So one of the ways in which you can frame a setback, I call it the storytelling frame.
Mm.
When something bad is happening to you, you can just think in terms of the story you're going to be able to tell someday about that particular event. So my son, let's see, was recently driving across Texas, and the car he was in broke down, and they were in the middle of nowhere, and they had to have it towed, and he went through the whole thing. And at the end, I said, someday that's going to be a first-rate story to tell. And it's an interesting thing because we do, when it comes to setbacks, we do tell other people about them. And some people just complain. They just say, okay, my car broke down and it was awful. And some people say, well, the car broke down and we handled it in the following way, and we ended up eating tacos at this really great restaurant that we wouldn't have found otherwise. A great story to tell. So that's another way to take the sting out of this moment right now.
There's an analogous thing that happens with professional writers, especially writers of fiction. I remember when I first started writing, and I thought at that point I was going to write novels. Almost anything, no matter how negative, seemed to present itself as fodder for writing some kind of analogous scene, right? Some character going through a similar ordeal. So just being thrust into some scary or, otherwise destabilizing experience, always at that point in my life had the silver lining of being something that I could figure out how to capture in prose. And I remember I was going through a breakup. My college girlfriend was breaking up with me, and I was, quite distraught over it. But a significant portion of my bandwidth was taken up with the effort to actually capture the totality of the experience in writing. And I was actually kind of thrilling to that part of it. And it was, at least for the time that I was doing it, massively undercut the component of psychological suffering.
Yeah. And my wife and I have lately been traveling a bunch to countries where we will be challenged by the different laws and the different customs. And now it's routine when we really hit an interesting snag. And we've hit a few in our time, but when we hit an interesting snag, is just to go into storytelling mode and just think, wow, this is really weird, but it's going to make a great story. Now, the interesting thing, you're writing fiction there, right? But it could be fiction based on real events. But in this storytelling frame, for the frame to work for it to work and have the proper psychological impact,
It needs to be honest. And
yeah, you have to tell the story as the story actually happened. You can't make things up about what happened. Yeah, I came up with a brilliant solution. No, come up with one, and then it can be part of the story, because otherwise it'll have zero impact. This storytelling thing, and you have studied evolutionary psychology. So the way it works is we have a rational brain and we have an animal brain, and the animal brain came first. The rational part of the brain was an after effect, and those two simply are playing a different game. They're like roommates, forced to live together, but playing a different game. But here's the interesting thing. The rational part of the brain can trick the lower part of the brain because it's smart. It can do that and can come up with these psychological devices. And of course, this was what the Stoics, they didn't think in those evolutionary terms, but this is what they were thinking about. So anger, that's the inner animal taking over. The inner animal, it can hijack your higher brain. It can do it quite easily. And the brain's only defense is the rational part of the brain's only defense is to cut it off at the pass, to come up with a way of tricking it so it doesn't feel the need to be triggered.